had together as friends.
What's going on? Live edited the raid means he sent his viewers here because. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Divinity. Can anybody still see me, or is there anything going on? No. Okay. Alrighty then. I will not be able to play that apparently. Hmm. Now what? So apparently I can't watch that at all. Hey, Autistic. I'll see if I can find something else that's similar. Here's Robert Pickton's cell video. Maybe because I was playing it. Maybe because I was really. All right. Can I sing? No.
Go to athletics.com today. It's like 70% off every single day. What's our biggest sale of the year? Apply mandatory financial statements. Other charges well here. Welcome to Ray's Shadow Rescue.
Okay, I don't know if that's it. No, it's not. Shoot. Now the one I was watching, I can't find.
You're just like,
All right, I'll speed it up and see if I can watch this one. Yeah, I'll have to keep pausing it. I can't find the one I was playing. It's like gone. It's weird. All right, we'll try this one.
Used commonly by residents and the police who clean up after them. They call the district Low Track, and it fits. Low Track is Vancouver's Skid Row. Its cold heart is the intersection of Main and Hastings. Nicknamed Pain and Wastings by the denizens who know it best.
What the hell?
Low Track is the heart of British Columbia's rock bottom drug scene, with estimates of its junkie population ranging from 5,000 to 10,000 at any given moment. The drugs of choice are heroin and crack cocaine, supplied by motorcycle gangs or Asian cartels that stake out choice blocks for themselves and defend their turf with brute force. Most of Low Track's female addicts support their habits via prostitution, trolling the streets night and day, haunted creatures rendered skeletal by what one Seattle Times reporter has dubbed the Jenny Crack diet. Safe sex is an illusion in this neighborhood, which boasts the highest HIV infection rate in North America.
Can you just say the Jenny Crack diet? The copyright censor is getting ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, can't do anything, right? This isn't the one I wanted.
Low Track's recent history is a tale of unrelenting failure. Vancouver lured affluent tourists by the hundreds of thousands to Expo 86, but the prospect of easy money brought a corresponding influx of seekers dubbed Twinkies by those already trapped in the life, changing names and addresses so often that investigators have no realistic hope of tracking a specific prostitute for any length of time. When hookers vanish, as opposed to being slain and left in garbage dumpsters or motel rooms, in canals and vacant lots, no one can say with any certainty if they have disappeared by choice or through foul play. Too often, no one cares. No pattern was discernible in the early cases. Rebecca Guno, 23, was last seen alive on June 22, 1983, reported missing 3 days later. Most of downtown Eastside's vanished women were not so promptly missed. The next official victim, 43-year-old Sherry Rail, would not be reported missing until 3 years after her January 1984 disappearance. 33-year-old Elaine Auerbach told friends she was moving to Seattle in March 1986.
See, these names I haven't even heard. Do you remember when we were going over it the other day and I was reading all the women that were, well, something came up, you gotta go. All right, you have a great night, Great Dane. Do you remember well, I was reading it and it was saying all the victims and possible victims. I haven't even heard of any of these women. So there's more? Holy crap.
But she never arrived, reported missing in mid-April. Teresa Ann Williams, a 26-year-old Aboriginal, was last seen alive in July 1988, reported missing in March 1989. 14 months elapsed between the August 1989 disappearance of 40-year-old mental patient Ingrid Soet and the report to police on October 1, 1990. The first Black victim, Kathleen Watley, was 39 years old when she vanished in June 1992, reported missing on the 29th of that month. The unknown predator took a 3-year vacation before claiming 47-year-old Catherine Gonzalez in March 1995, her disappearance reported to authorities on February 9, 1996. The year's second victim, in April, was 32-year-old Catherine Knight, missing 7 months before police received the report on November 11th.
I don't know who these women are. Are you kidding me? That's scary. There's more? I mean, that could just jaw-dropping. Today is the National Missing Person Day. That's another reason why I wanted to do this movie. Sorry, documentary. That's insane. I don't even know what to think because I have all the transcripts and everything, and it's like, there's more? This is insane. Unless they're not talking about Robert it says they're talking about Robert Pickton, but I've never heard of any of these names.
Dorothy Spence, a 36-year-old Aboriginal, vanished 4 months after night in August 1995, but her disappearance was reported earlier on October 30th. The year's last victim was 23-year-old Diana Melnick, lost in December, reported missing 4 days after Christmas. Again, the hunt was stalled, this time until October 1996, when 24-year-old Tanya Hollock disappeared, reported on November 3rd. Olivia Williams rated less concern at age 22, her December 1996 disappearance ignored until July 4, 1997. Stephanie Lane, the youngest victim so far at age 20, was hospitalized for an episode of drug psychosis on March 10, 1997. Released the following day, she was last seen alive at the Patricia Hotel on Hastings Street. Janet Henry survived a near miss with serial killer Clifford Olson in the 1980s, drugged
Ooh.
but spared by Olson for unknown reasons. Yet, she wound up in Low-Track a decade later and met another predator. Henry was reported missing on June 28, 1997, 2 days after her last contact with relatives. August 1997 was the most lethal month to date. 3 women lost, although police would not learn of those cases for more than a year. Marnie Frey, age 25, was not reported missing until September 4, 1998.
I forgot to mute myself. Sorry, guys. This one here, I believe, is one of the more not famous, but famous ones. Marty. I remember seeing her face a lot.
19 days later, on September 23rd, the first missing person report was filed on 32-year-old Helen Hallmark. Jacqueline Murdoch, 28, was not reported missing until October 3rd, 1998. Detectives still have no idea exactly when or where the women vanished. The next official victim, 33-year-old Cindy Beck, dropped out of sight in September 1997, but her disappearance was reported on April 30th, 1998, 4 months before the first of August's missing women. Andrea Borehaven's friends recall that she never
You guys remember that name? Andrea Borehaven. I was reading about her as well. It's just sad. All these women. He said so Robert Pickton alleged that he had alrighty, Divinity, have fun. So Robert Pickton said that he had murdered 49 women and he was pissed off because he was stupid and got caught before he got to 50. Like, that's disgusting.
never had an address and just bounced off the walls. She vanished sometime during 1997, they believe, but no one bothered to inform police until May 18, 1999. 39-year-old Carrie Koski was popular. By contrast, she disappeared in January 1998 and was reported missing on the 29th of that month. 4 more women would vanish before Vancouver police took an interest in the case. Jacqueline McDonnell, 23, disappeared in mid-January 1998, officially reported missing on February 22, 1999. Inga Hall, age 46 or 47, was last seen alive in February 1993, her disappearance logged with remarkable celerity on March 3rd. 29-year-old Sarah Jane DeVries was last seen alive on April 14, 1998, reported missing by friends the same day. She left behind a diary filled with observations on a stunted life, including this: "I think my hate is going to be my destruction, my executioner." Sheila Egan, a prostitute since age 15, vanished at 20 in July 1998, reported on August 5th. As that lethal summer waned, detectives in Vancouver were about to have a nightmare thrust upon them. The official search for Vancouver's
But look at them all. Chantel Bien, 21. It's hard to read their names, so I'll go over here. Glennis Sowen, she was 25. Sherry Irving, 24. Christy Fowley, 18. Tina Louise Parr, there's not even an age for her. Angela Joesbury, she was 22. Patricia Johnson, 25. Deborah Jones, 43. Laura Ma, 42. Leah Miner, 35.
missing women began in September 1998 after an Aboriginal group sent police a list of victims allegedly murdered.
Georgina Pappin was 34. Brenda Wolf. A lot of these people are Indigenous, and that's goes without saying, that's pretty much what Canada's known for, is missing Indigenous women, the Highway of Tears. And it wasn't even just that. Robert Pickton was a part of it too, it looks like. Frances Young, 36. Sherry Lynn Smith was 18. That's the youngest one, not the 20-year-old. She was 18 too. Jenny Verminger, that was 28.
in downtown East Side with a demand for a thorough investigation. Authorities examined the list and pronounced it flawed. Some of the victims had died from disease
Wow.
or drug overdoses.
Mona Wilson looks like she was beat up. Umi O'Brien, 34. Marnie Frey was 24. Marcella was 20. Julie Young, there's no ages for some of these women.
Others had left Vancouver and were found alive. But Detective Dave Dixon was intrigued by the complaint and launched
Andrea Boerhaven, 25. Jacqueline McDonald. Her face is very familiar, actually. Yeah, at least he left the kids alone. Jacqueline McDonald, that face. I've seen it everywhere. And Marnie Frey. Karen Smith, Helen Hallmark, 2831. Kathleen was 42.
his own inquiry, drawing up a list of low-track women who had simply disappeared without a trace. There were enough names on that second list to worry.
Patricia Gay Perkins, Jacqueline Murdoch, Linda Jean Coombs, Sherry Lynn Rail. All four of those women don't even have an age. Angela Jardine, that was 27.
Dixon and inspire his superiors to create an investigative task force. The 4-year search for answers had begun. Vancouver police began their review with 40 unsolved disappearances of local
Sorry, I know
women
it's
dating
echoing. I
back
just don't
to
want to keep going back and forth.
1971. The lost came from all.
So Elaine was 21, Ingrid 30, Michelle Gurney was 29. A lot of these women are Indigenous. Oh my God. Teresa Williams, 16. 16 years old. They said the youngest was 20. That doesn't even make sense. Yeah, absolutely. The men as well. Yeah, 16. 16 years old, Teresa Williams. It's same with the men, the Indigenous men. They're missing everywhere all over Canada. I mean, this is crazy. I didn't realize how many were Indigenous. That just Rose Ann Jansen was 42. Tiffany Drew was 27. Maria L'Alberte was 52. Ruby Hardy, 37. Linda Joyce, 18. Carol Davis was 29, it looks like.
Walks of life and all parts of Vancouver, but the search for a pattern narrowed the roster to 16 low-track prostitutes reported missing since 1995. By the time detectives made their first arrest in the case, that list would grow to include 54 women vanished between 1983 and 2001, with
Angela, no age for her. Bonnie Whalen was 32. Sherry Irving was 24. Cindy Felix was 43. Pauline Johnson, 30. Oh my God, that one looks so young. Tracy Chartrand was 25. Donna Kiss, 25. Kimberly, she looks very young. Connie Christensen, Serena Abbott's.
85 investigators assigned to the case. But in the early stages of the search, police were busy trying to decide if they had a serial killer at large in Vancouver.
You think?
One who thought so was Inspector Kim Rossmo, creator of a geographic profiling technique designed to map unsolved crimes and highlight any pattern or criminal signature overlooked by detectives assigned to individual cases. In May 1999, Rossmo reported an unusual concentration of disappearances in downtown East Side. But police dismissed the notion in their public statements, insisting that the vanished women might have left Vancouver voluntarily in search of greener streets. Inspector Gary Greer advised the press,
They said 50 or 49 moose. Robert Pickton said himself while he was in prison, he said there was an undercover cop that was in the cell with him trying to get information from Robert Pickton, and he had stated to this man that he only killed 49, and he was pissed off because he didn't get to 50. He was sloppy and he screwed up. And he was mad at himself for screwing up because he wanted to get to at least 50 before he got caught. It's just disgusting.
"We're in no way saying that there's a serial murderer out there. We're in no way saying that all these people missing are dead. We're not saying any of that." Rossmo, meanwhile, stood by his theory and resigned from the force after receiving a punitive demotion. His subsequent lawsuit against Vancouver PD was dismissed. Internal dissension was not the only problem faced by police in their search for low-tracks missing women. Canada's violent crime linkage system did not track missing persons without some evidence of foul play, and task force investigators were so far empty-handed. In the absence of a corpse or crime scene, even a specific date for most of the disappearances, forensic evidence was non-existent. Pimps and prostitutes were naturally reluctant to cooperate with the same officers who might throw them in jail. At one point, detectives identified a man who had serially assaulted 5 streetwalkers in 2 months, but none of the victims would file a complaint. Resources were perpetually limited, despite increasing media attention to the case. Still, the detectives forged ahead as best they could. In June 1999, they met with relatives of several missing women, seeking information and DNA material for prospective identification of remains. Police and coroners' databases were reviewed throughout Canada and the United States, as were various drug rehabilitation facilities, witness protection programs, hospitals, mental institutions, and AIDS hospices. Burial records at Glenhaven Cemetery were examined, going back to 1978. Grim news came from Edmonton, Alberta, where police had logged 12 unsolved prostitute murders between 1986 and 1993. Closer to home, 4 hookers had been killed and dumped around Agassiz in 1995 and 1996, but none of them were from the low-track missing list. The search went on, each new day reminding officers that they were literally clueless, chasing shadows in the dark. 4 more prostitutes vanished from downtown East Side while the task force was compiling data in the last 3 months of 1998. Julie Young, age 31, was last seen alive in October, finally reported missing on June 1, 1999. Angela Jardine, a 28-year-old addict with the mental capacity of a 10-year-old child, had been working low-track streets for 8 years when she vanished in November 1998. Her disappearance.
A 10-year-old child? How, like, that was what her mindset was? How did she ever survive with that 10-year-old child mindset? That is insane.
Reported on December 6. Michelle Gurney, age 30, dropped out of sight in December, reported missing 3 days before Christmas. 20-year-old Marcella Creason got out of jail on December 27, 1998, but never returned to the apartment where her mother and boyfriend were preparing a belated Christmas dinner. Police learned of her disappearance on January 11, 1999. Not every woman on the missing list was gone forever, though. Between September 1999 and March 2002, 5 of the lost were found, dead or alive, and thus were deleted from the roster of presumed kidnap victims. The first to vanish had been Patricia Gay Perkins, 22 years old when she abandoned Low Track and a 1-year-old son in an effort to save her own life. An incredible 18 years elapsed before she was reported missing to police in 1996. Another 3 years passed before she saw her name on a published list of Vancouver's missing hookers on December 15, 1999, and telephoned from Ontario to tell police she was alive, drug-free, and living well. Another survivor, also discovered in December 1999, was 50-year-old Roseanne Jensen. She had dropped out of sight in October 1991 and was reported missing a short time later, added to the official missing roster when Vancouver's task force organized in 1998. Police found her alive in Toronto while scanning a national healthcare database. Vancouver.
This is our world reality. I'm not sure just how long it's been this way, but current makes it more possible. He doesn't really have a Y moose. It's more, I would imagine, because he liked it. Yeah, the thrill of it. That's what I think. I really truly think he did it because he enjoyed it. That's what I think. Because there's no other explanation whatsoever. Nobody's ever found one anyways.
Constable Anne Drennan told reporters that Jensen had left downtown East Side for personal reasons. It doesn't appear she knew she was being looked for. Relatives of Linda Jean Coombs twice reported her missing, in August 1994 and again in April 1999. Unknown to her family or police, Linda had died of a heroin overdose on February 15, 1994, her body delivered to Vancouver's morgue without identification. Her mother viewed a photo of the Jane Doe corpse in 1995, but could not recognize.
Welcome to Raid Shadow Legends. If you're wondering just what you're getting into, Raid Shadow Legends is a free-to-play
her own child, wasted by narcotics, malnutrition, and disease. Identification was finally made in September 1999 via a comparison of DNA material submitted by the family, and another name was removed from the official victims list. A similar solution removed Karen Ann Smith from the roster. Reported missing on April 27, 1999, she had in fact died on February 13, 1999, at the University of Alberta Hospital in Edmonton. The cause of death was listed as heart failure related to hepatitis C. Once again, DNA contributed to the belated identification. Another low-track prostitute, 24-year-old Ann Woolsey, was reported missing by her mother on January 1, 1997, though the actual date of her disappearance was anyone's guess. 5 years later, in March 2002, Woolsey's father called from Montreal to tell police his daughter was alive and well. Estranged from his ex-wife by a bitter divorce, Woolsey's father, like Anne herself, had been unaware of the police report filed in Vancouver until a suspect's arrest renewed media interest in the case. 5 out of 54 deleted from the list of vanished women, but their slots never remained empty for long. There were always new victims, it seemed, but where had they gone? Police are never
I was just gonna say, if any of you ever played that game, it looked kind of cool.
entirely without suspects when prostitutes are victimized. In fact, a more common problem is too many suspects, with streetwalkers often unwilling to file charges or testify at trial. So it was in Vancouver, as the task force began logging names and
Yeah, okay, so they're saying with a lot of women that are unwilling, right, to press charges and whatnot. There was a girl that was willing. She was actually at Robert Picton's house, and he brought her home. They had some drinks, messing around. He handcuffed her, right? He goes to stab her, so he stabs her. She stabs him back. She somehow gets away. They both end up at the same damn hospital too. Like, it's like, what? Yeah, it's boring really fast. So they both end up at the same hospital, and sure enough, Robert Picton has the key for her handcuff that she's stuck in at the hospital. And instead of charging the piece of shit, they let them both go because she was a prostitute. So there's no point. No point even saying anything. They can say that, but no. It's like Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes or Marvel.
descriptions of potential predators. One whom the detectives considered was 36-year-old Michael Leopold, arrested in 1996 for assaulting a low-track streetwalker, beating her, and trying to force a rubber ball down her throat. A passerby heard the girl's screams and frightened Leopold away, but he surrendered to police 3 days later. Granted, he had been in custody since then, held in lieu of bond while he awaited trial, but with disappearances dating back to the mid-1980s, any sadist with a propensity for attacking hookers rated a closer look. Leopold regaled a court-appointed psychiatrist with his fantasies of kidnapping and murdering prostitutes, but he insisted that the 1996 assault had been his only foray into real-life action. Task force investigators ultimately absolved Leopold of any involvement in the disappearances, but he had a rude surprise in store at his trial in August 2000. Convicted of aggravated assault, Leopold received a 14-year prison sentence, with credit for the 4 years served before the trial. Another suspect in the case was 43-year-old Alberta native Barry Thomas Niedermeyer. Convicted in 1990 of pimping a 14-year-old girl, Niedermeyer apparently left prison with a grudge against streetwalkers. In 1995, he was jailed again, this time for selling contraband cigarettes from his Vancouver tobacco shop, driven out of business by a heavy fine. In April 2000, Vancouver police charged Niedermeyer with violent attacks on 7 low-track hookers. The charges against him including assault, kidnapping, sexual assault, robbery, unlawful confinement, and administering a noxious substance. None of Niedermeyer's alleged victims were drawn from the Vancouver missing list, and Constable Anne Drennan told reporters, "It's impossible to say at this point whether or not Niedermeyer may be related to those cases. Certainly, he is a person of interest, and he will continue to be a person of interest." More frustrating still were the suspects described to police without names or addresses. On August 10, 2001, Vancouver police announced their search for an unidentified rapist who attacked a 38-year-old victim outside her low-track hotel a week earlier. During the attack, police spokesman said, the man claimed responsibility for sexually assaulting and killing other women in the downtown East Side. The victim had escaped by leaping from her car, and while she offered a description to authorities, the boastful predator remains at large. There are countless more besides. The Downtown East Side Youth Activities Society maintains a daily bad date file, page after page of reports from local prostitutes who have been threatened or injured by nameless tricks. Their tales run the gamut from verbal abuse to beatings and stabbings, presented as a warning for those who support themselves and their habits on the streets. All in vain. Late in 1998, task force detectives got their best lead yet from 37-year-old Bill Hiscox. Widowed 2 years earlier, Hiscox had turned to drugs and alcohol.
This guy here, Bill, he was living on the farm in a trailer or something, um, when it was active, and he's in the documentary. Missing teeth and all that good stuff, right? But yeah, he was one of the ones that, told on Robert, I believe, like, helped in putting him away.
After his wife died, rescued from the downhill slide when his foster sister found him a job at P&B Salvage in Surrey, southeast of Vancouver. The proprietors were Robert William Willie Picton and his brother David of Port Coquitlam. Hiscox's helpful relative was Robert Picton's off-and-on girlfriend in 1997, and Hiscox picked up his paychecks at the brothers' Port Coquitlam pig farm, described by Hiscox as a creepy-looking place patrolled by a vicious 600-pound boar. "I never saw a pig like that who would chase you and bite at you," he told police. "It was running out with the dogs around the property." Hiscox had grown concerned about the Pictons after reading newspaper reports on Vancouver's missing women. Robert Picton was a pretty quiet guy, hard to strike up a conversation with, but I don't think he had much use for men.
See what I mean? You see his teeth and just the way he is, and you can tell by the way he talks and the way he acts that, yeah, he's done drugs, he drinks, and blah, blah, blah. And then you get the women that look like him, the prostitutes and whatnot, and the cops just don't want to deal with it. But what makes me mad is there was more than one woman. There was many attacks, many women missing, many women murdered, and the police didn't do shit about it. Took them a long time.
Picton drove a converted bus with deeply tinted windows, Hiscox told authorities. "It was Willie's pride and joy," he said, "and he wouldn't part with it for anything. Willie used it a lot." The brothers also ran a supposed charity, the Piggy Palace Good Times Society, registered with the Canadian government in 1996 as a non-profit society intended to organize, coordinate, manage, and operate special events, functions, dances, shows, and exhibitions on behalf of service organizations, sports organizations, and other worthy groups. According to Hiscox, the special events convened at Piggy Palace, a converted building at the hog farm, were drunken raves that featured entertainment by an ever-changing cast of downtown East Side prostitutes. Police were already familiar with the Picton brothers. David Francis Picton had been convicted of sexual assault in 1992, fined $1,000, and given 30 days probation. His victim.
Yeah, there you are. Drunken raves at the hog farm. And police were there too, same with Hell's Angels and everything. No, I don't care if you're don't worry about jacking my chat. Have at her. Yeah, like so that's his brother, right? And as you just heard, it was they were describing how he was charged with that kind of thing. Well, that's why I do believe that because Robert he ended up moving away from the farm, this guy here. And then Robert, like, took over the farm himself. His brother David didn't. He just bought a house and kinda moved down the road, right? But at David's house, he was the one that had that big ass, like, dance hall, that bar, Piggy Palace, where they all went, the Hells Angels, the police, and everything. So, I think a lot of people knew what was going on, but because Robert Pickton was basically paying them off, nobody said anything. It's just sad.
Victim, in that case, told police Picton had attacked her in his trailer at the pig farm, but she managed to escape when a third party came in and distracted him. Port Coquitlam authorities sought an order to destroy one of David's dogs in April 1998 under the Livestock Protection Act, but the proceedings were later dismissed without explanation. Picton had also been sued 3 times for damages resulting from traffic accidents in 1988 and 1991, settling all 3 claims out of court. Soon after Piggy Palace opened, the Picton brothers and their sister, Linda Louise Wright, found themselves in court again, sued by Port Coquitlam officials for allegedly violating city zoning ordinances. According to the complaint, their property was zoned for agricultural use, but they had altered a large farm building on the land for the purpose of holding dances, concerts, and other recreations that sometimes drew as many as 1,800 persons. Following a New Year's Eve party on December 31st, 1998, the Pictons were slapped with an injunction banning future parties. The court order noting the police were henceforth authorized to arrest and remove any person attending public events at the farm. The society finally lost its nonprofit status in January 2000 for failure to provide mandatory financial statements. Other charges filed against Robert Pickton were more serious. In March 1997, he was charged with the attempted murder of a drug-addicted prostitute, Wendy Lynn Eistetter, whom he stabbed several times in a wild melee at the pig farm. Eistetter told police that Pickton handcuffed and attacked her on March 23rd, but that she escaped after disarming him and stabbing him with his own knife. A motorist found Eistetter beside the highway at 1:45 a.m. and took her to the nearest emergency room, while Pickton sought treatment for a single stab wound at Eagle Ridge Hospital. He was released on a $2,000 bond, but the charge was later dismissed without explanation in January 1988. The stabbing had crystallized Bill.
See what I mean? They both ended up at the same damn hospital. They both were stabbed. There was charges brought against him. They just let him go.
Hiscox's suspicion about Robert Pickton, whom he called quite a strange character. Aside from the assault, Hiscox told police, there were all the girls that are going missing and all the purses and IDs that are out there in his trailer and stuff. Pickton, Hiscox told detectives, frequents the downtown area all the time for girls. Police recorded Hiscox's statement, and a detective accompanied him to the pig farm, afterward vowing to push the higher-ups all the way to the top to investigate. Subsequent press reports indicate that the farm was searched 3 times, apparently without result. The brothers would remain on file, persons of interest to the inquiry, but no surveillance would be mounted on the farm. Back in Vancouver, meanwhile, the list of missing women grew longer, with no end in sight. As a new millennium dawned in Vancouver, the task force investigation had expanded to include more than 3 times the number of missing women initially listed in 1998. Some of the new presumed victims had been missing since the mid-1980s, their disappearance recognized only now, while others continued to vanish from low track with the search still in progress. Warnings and surveillance went for nothing, it seemed, as the women dropped out of sight. From the 80s, police now listed presumed kidnap victims Lee Minor, last seen in December 1984, and Laura Ma, whose date of disappearance was listed simply as 1985. Details were equally lacking for vanished Nancy Clark in 1991, Elsie Sebastian in 1992, and 17-year-old Angela Arsenault in 1994. Detectives had a month for Frances Young, April 1996, but no other details were available concerning the 38-year-old woman's final days. Police acknowledged the disappearance of 3 more women in 1997, bringing that lethal year's total to 9, but evidence remained elusive. One of the 3, 52-year-old Maria La Liberté, had made her last known appearance in Low Track on New Year's Day, but victims Cindy Felix and Sherry Irving proved less accommodating, their movements so erratic that police could not pinpoint the season of their disappearances, much less specific dates. And so it went. 37-year-old Ruby Hardy vanished sometime in 1998, but she was not reported missing until March 27, 2002. Wendy Crawford, Jennifer Firminger, and Georgina Papin all disappeared in 1999, ignored until police listed their names in March 2000. A month later, on April 25, 2000, detectives acknowledged the February 1999 disappearance of 32-year-old Brenda Wolfe. Tiffany Drew, age 27, vanished on December 31, 1999, but she would not make the list for another 2 years, reported missing on February 8, 2002. At times, it seemed a hope.
You just gave me a new an idea, Patty. What I'll do is I'll make a I'm gonna make a phone booth emoji. So every time one of us does go to the bathroom, we'll just put the emoji in there and then we'll know what we're doing instead of just stopping everything. I'm gonna make one. Damn, I wanted to watch the other documentary. It had so much more information. I've never heard any of this stuff before. I heard some of it, but not all of it. Yeah, for when I leave.
Cause, but Vancouver police persevered. Slowly, publicity began to make a difference, if only in the speed with which new missing persons were reported. Dawn Cray, 42, was last seen alive on November 1, 2000, reported missing on December 11th. 43-year-old Deborah Lynn Jones vanished on December 21, 2000, her disappearance logged on Christmas Day. Police stalled unaccountably on listing Patricia Johnson, last seen alive on February 27, 2001, but 34-year-old Yvonne Bone was listed on March 21, 2001, only 5 days after she vanished. Heather Bottomley, a 24-year-old described in Vancouver police reports as a violent suicide risk, held the record, reportedly missing the same day she vanished on April 17, 2001. Heather Chinnock disappeared that same month, followed by Angela Josbury in June and Serena Abbotsway in July. 34-year-old Diane Rock vanished on October 19, 2001, reported missing on December 13th. Mona Wilson, 26, was last seen alive on November 23, 2001, added to the list a week later. Whatever progress detectives had made in tracking disappearances, the killer, if indeed there was a killer, seemed to have grown more brazen, striking at a pace unrivaled since the disappearances began. Police, for their part, could only
Welcome to Raid Shadow Legends. If you're wondering just what you're getting into, Raid Shadow
watch and wait for their faceless quarry to make a mistake that would finally place him within their grasp. Because the downtown East Side disappearances spanned nearly 2 decades, Vancouver police had to consider the possibility that some sexual predator identified with other crimes might be responsible for some of the earlier cases. Unfortunately, in British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest generally, there was no shortage of serial killers competing for attention. First among equals in that respect was Seattle's elusive Green River Killer, blamed for the death or disappearance of 49 women, mostly prostitutes or runaways, between January.
Whoa, would you hear that? 49 women for Gary Ridgway as well? The Green River Killer? Really? That is crazy. So Robert Pickton, the Canadian serial killer, and then you get this dude, Gary Ridgway, the Green River, and they both had 49 victims. Wow, that's weird, eh? Yeah, it is a nasty story. It's what nightmares are made out of.
1982 and April 1984. The Riverman was also suspected of 40-plus slayings in neighboring Snohomish County, but his murder spree had ended with a whimper, leaving the police and FBI profilers wringing their hands in frustration. Finally, on November 30, 2001, DNA evidence led to the arrest of 52-year-old Gary Leon Ridgway, charged with murder in 4 of the Green River slayings. Vancouver police acknowledged reports that Ridgway had visited their city, but no evidence surfaced connecting him to Lotrax's missing women. Another long-shot candidate was Dayton Leroy Rogers, a sadistic foot fetishist dubbed the Molalla Forest Killer, who began stalking prostitutes around Portland, Oregon in January 1987. By August of that year, he had claimed 8 lives and injured 27 other victims, identified after he carelessly performed his last killing before multiple witnesses. Incarcerated since August 7, 1987, Rogers was examined and finally rejected as a possible suspect in the Vancouver abductions listed before that date. A serial killer we covered not long ago, Keith Hunter Jesperson, was a British Columbia native born in 1956 who washed.
This guy, Keith Jesperson, he's another sick bastard as well. I watched his daughter's documentary and it's called he's the Happy Face Killer. Yeah, there's a lot in Canada, apparently. This guy is disgusting. His daughter, beautiful, she's a smart woman, and I remember her saying that whenever she went out with her father to go eat dinner at a restaurant, he would sit there and hit on every single waitress, especially the young ones. And it made her feel icky in some kind of way, you know? It's what he did to those women too. There's so many. Hey, SD.
Out of training for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police after an injury left him unfit for active duty. Instead, he hit the road as a long-haul trucker, traveling widely across North America and murdering various women in the process. Nicknamed the Happy Face Killer for the smiling cartoon signature on letters he sent to police, Jesperson was jailed for a Washington murder in March 1995. At one point, he claimed 160 slayings, describing his female victims as piles of garbage dumped on the roadside. And while he later recanted those statements, convictions in Washington and Wyoming removed him permanently from circulation. Once again, however, no link could be found between Happy Face and the vanished low-track hookers. Other prospects were considered and rejected in their turn. George Waterfield Russell, sentenced to life imprisonment for the murders of 3 Bellevue, Washington women in 1990, was discounted because he enjoyed posing his mutilated victims, putting them on display after he slaughtered them in their own homes. Robert Yates, convicted in October 2000 of killing 13 prostitutes around Spokane, Washington, suspected of 2 more murders in a neighboring county, could not be placed in Vancouver for any of the local disappearances. John Eric Armstrong, a U.S. Navy veteran arrested in April 2000, confessed to slaying 30 women around the world, but his statements excluded Vancouver, and no evidence was found to contradict him. In Vancouver itself, police cast an eye on twice convicted Ronald Richard McCauley. Sentenced to 17 years in prison on his first conviction in 1982, McCauley was paroled on September 14, 1994. A year later, in September.
Hey, Dragon Mama. Yeah, yeah, right? Pretty much.
September 1995, he was charged with another assault, convicted, and returned to prison in 1996. While never formally charged with murder, he is described by police as their prime suspect in the slayings of 4 low-track prostitutes killed in 1995 and early 1996. 3 of the victims were dumped between Agassiz and Mission, where McCauley resided. The 4th was found on Mount Seymour in North Vancouver. Besides those cases, in January 1997, Vancouver police declared McCauley a suspect in the 1995 disappearances of Catherine Gonzalez, Catherine Knight, and Dorothy Spence. No charges were forthcoming, however, and McCauley was forgotten 4 years later as the spotlight focused on another suspect. This one, too, would be familiar to detectives from the early days of the investigation, and their belated reconsideration would cause no end of grief for the authorities. Vancouver residents were unprepared for the announcement when it came on February 2, 2002. That morning, Vancouver Constable Catherine Galliford told reporters that searchers were scouring the Picton Pig Farm, an adjacent property in Port Coquitlam, first examined back in 1997. "I can tell you a search is being conducted on that property, and the search is being executed by the Missing Women Task Force," she reported. Robert Picton was already in custody, jailed on a charge of possessing illegal firearms. Bailed out on that charge, he was arrested once more on February 22nd, this time facing 2 counts of first-degree murder. Authorities identified the victims as Serena Abbotsway and Mona Wilson. Picton professed to be shocked by the charges, but relatives of the victims were equally agitated, noting that both women vanished 3 years after Piggy Palace was identified as a potential murder scene. On March 8th, investigators declared that DNA recovered from the farm had been conclusively identified as Abbotsway's. A month later, on April 3rd, Picton was charged with 3 more counts of murder, naming victims Jacqueline McDonald, Heather Bottomley, and Diane Rock. A 6th murder charge for Angela Joesbury was filed against Picton 6 days later. As in the first 2 cases, all 4 victims had been slain since Bill Hiscox had fingered Picton as a suspect in the low-track disappearances. May 22nd, a 7th first-degree murder charge was filed against Picton when the remains of Brenda Wolfe were found on his farm. If Picton was the low-track slayer, survivors asked, why had the searches of his property in 1997 and 1998 failed to uncover any evidence? More to the point, how could he abduct and murder additional victims between 1999?
I got a question too. If there was murders that were taking place at Piggy Palace, where the cops were and Hell's Angels were and everybody else was partying, and which his brother David owned that and lived there, why wasn't he charged too? Because there's no way in hell his brother David, Robert's brother David, was not involved. There's just no way. He had to have known. Like there's women that knew this and didn't say anything. And there's like I don't get it. He should have been jailed a long time ago. I know his hands, every time I see that fucking picture, makes me feel sick.
In 2001, when he should have been under police surveillance. Proclaiming his innocence on all charges, Picton was scheduled for trial in November 2002, but detectives were not finished in their search at Piggy Palace. The full operation, they announced on March 21, 2002, might drag on for as much as a year. As for other victims and any further charges, they refused to speculate. No charges have been filed against David Picton or any other suspect. Tabloid headlines screamed their verdict in Vancouver on the 10th of April 2002.
See what I mean? I can't stand that. Yeah. Hi, Anna. Yeah, there was blood on his hands. I think that might have been from a pig, but yeah, I guess right now you don't really know with him. Yeah, like, see, that's the Piggy Palace, that's the bar, that's whatever, and that's where his brother owns that. Robert's brother owns that, and they're all partying there and whatnot, and obviously Robert and David, the brothers, and they do stuff, like, together, or at least they know about it, and do you see that no charges were laid? That doesn't make sense to me. Canada law, all these laws for Canada is horrible. You can go out and unalive somebody, and it's nothing. It doesn't matter. Have fun. It's not like you're gonna get in shit for it. They just don't care here.
2. 54 women fed to pigs. But were they? Suspect Robert Pickton, charged with 7 murders so far, was presumed innocent until proven guilty. His tentative trial date still 6 months away. Police searching his pig farm declared that they would not be finished with their work before spring of 2003. With the results from that search pending, the fate of 47 other missing women remained conjectural, and some critics suggested that the official list was only the tip of the iceberg. On February 13, 2002, 9 days before Pickton was slapped with his first murder charge, spokesman for Prostitution Alternatives Counseling Education claimed that 110 streetwalkers from British Columbia's Lower Mainland had been slain or kidnapped in the past 2 decades. Computer data obtained from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police placed the number even higher, 144 prostitutes murdered or missing with foul play suspected over the province at large. It may be comforting to think one human monster was responsible for all those crimes, at least within Vancouver, but was it a realistic hope? Before Pickton's indictment, detectives favored other theories. Some believed a long-haul trucker was disposing of Vancouver's prostitutes, while others thought the missing women had been lured aboard foreign cargo ships, ganged, and murdered by crewmen, then buried at sea. Still, others rejected the serial killer hypothesis until the very day of Pickton's arrest. The only thing certain about Vancouver's mystery at that point was its bitter divisiveness. 4 more charges of murder were laid against Robert William Pickton in Port Coquitlam Court Wednesday, October 2, 2002. Pickton was now charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of Heather Gabrielle Shinnock, Tanya Marlowe Hollock, Sherry Irving, and Inga Monique Hall. Tanya Hollock and Inga Hall appeared on the earliest missing women list. Hollock was 21 when she was last seen on October 29 of 1996. Hall was 46 when she disappeared on February 26, 1998. Sherry Irving was 23 when she disappeared 2 months after Hollock in December of 1996. Heather Shinnock was 31 when she vanished on April 15, 2001. This brought the total number of murder charges laid against Pickton to 15, all women from Vancouver's downtown East Side. The Missing Women's Task Force began searching the Pickton farm in Port Coquitlam in February. The number of women on the missing women list was 63. At a task force media briefing, RCMP Constable Kate Galliford said, "This case is now the largest serial killer investigation in Canadian history." More women victims were linked to the pig farm owned by 54-year-old Robert Pickton. The discovery increased the tally to 30 women whose remains had been found on the farm. Fox News reported some of the gruesome details. Police found human body parts in freezers used to store unsold meat. They also discovered remains in a wood chipper, the victims' bodies turned into pig feed. Unlike crime news coverage in the United States, the details of the worst serial murder case in Canadian history were banned from media coverage in
Sorry, I didn't mean to leave that unmuted. Sorry. Yeah, he fed them to the pigs. It's ridiculous, and yeah, they wouldn't let everybody know what the details were. I don't understand their point. I don't get it. But there so because of him feeding remains to the pigs, all the because he would give away his meat. He wouldn't sell it. He would give away his meat to friends, family, whatever, right? Bacon, ham, you name it. So they had to put out a statement, the police did, because they had to tell everyone that basically they were eating human. Yeah. So cops were eating it, family was eating it, friends was eating it, prostitutes were eating people. And then there was this plant, and they would give, he would give like intestines and I don't know, like pig hooves and feet and stuff like that. And he would give it to them so they can make fucking lipstick and stuff. People were wearing people on their lips in their soap. Oh my God, like A set of teeth is much easier to hide than the body. Just sick.
Canada. While this approach protects the accused from pretrial publicity that could affect a jury, it also denies the public an opportunity to hold the police accountable for the speed and quality of their investigation. Like many cases where the victims are prostitutes, police assume that the missing women have just moved to other areas to ply their trade. The cases are treated very differently than if a large number of middle-class women disappeared. The Toronto Star interviewed RCMP Task Force spokesperson Corporal Kate Galliford, who told them, "Believe it or not, we're still in the somewhat early stages of our investigation." The 6 women who were last identified were Yvonne Bowen, Dawn Cray, Wendy Crawford, Andrea Borhaven, Carrie Koski, and Cara Ellis. 3 of the 9 women remained unidentified. The strict publicity ban on Pickton's preliminary trial hearing in July of 2003 was instigated to ensure information was not broadcast to potential jurors before the case was brought to trial. But, despite the ban, evidence from the hearing leaked out and was reported widely. Peter Ritchie, Pickton's lawyer, told reporters that the leaks were precisely what he was afraid of. The accusations that police mishandled the investigation gained new momentum when the former detective and geographic profiler, Kim Rossmo, claimed that he had told police a serial killer was probably responsible for the disappearances of prostitutes in the Vancouver area, but was ignored. Rossmo then acted surprised and sued the Vancouver department for wrongful dismissal when they failed to renew his contract. The announcement of the new search site came just one day before a preliminary hearing in a Port Coquitlam, British Columbia provincial court into the case that was to begin hearing final submissions from the Crown and lawyers for Pickton. The new site, approximately 65 kilometers east of Vancouver, was located in a high-traffic area adjacent to Highway 7, also known as the Lougheed Highway. Galliford reporters stated, "We started in this area based on evidence we uncovered during the course of our investigation," adding that the police became aware of the area just recently. Some investigators from the Port Coquitlam farm would be searching the new site, plus an 8-member team of RCMP divers. The investigation
It looks like a big ass dump. That's what that looks like. You have to go, all right, Dragon Mama. Just everywhere, everywhere that pig farm is, all around it just looks disgusting and looks like a huge ass junkyard dump. Nasty. And the farm. So his farm is actually right across from a freaking Costco. You had something like that here in the US. A mother fed her. Oh my God. At least you guys have the death penalty. We don't. We haven't had it in, I don't know, since what, the 60s or something like that. This motherfucker deserved it. That is sick.
at the Port Coquitlam property was expected to continue until fall. 2 of the 4 soil sifters being used at the pig farm had been shut down, so the soil underneath could be excavated and searched. The 52 anthropologists who were manning the sifters would be sent to the new site. The area was now fenced off and under 24-hour protection. Prior to the press release, Vancouver police contacted family members from all 63 missing women to inform them of the new investigation. By mid-October 2004, the 21-month search of Robert Pickton's 14-acre pig farm by 102 forensic anthropologists linked 30 women's DNA to the property. 27 of the women were among those listed as missing, and 3 have not yet been identified. The newly identified women fit the same profile as the other female victims. They had histories of working in the sex trade, histories of substance abuse, and histories of frequenting the downtown East Side. Pickton, who was arrested for trying to murder a prostitute on March 23, 1997, went free after charges were dropped. Also, a person who worked for Pickton tipped authorities to him in 1998, but the government did nothing to investigate the property until 2002. Despite the wild parties that were held in the Piggy Palace on his property, Pickton was described by his friends as a quiet loner. Robert Pickton never drank or smoked, but simply dedicated his life to working on the property he and his brother and sister inherited when their parents died in the 1970s. They raised and slaughtered pigs. Robert Pickton and his brother, David, who was convicted of sexual assault in 1992, operated a salvage business, but David had not been charged in the murders. In March 2004, British Columbia's provincial health officer, Dr. Perry Kendall, publicly released even more alarming news in relation to serial killer Robert Pickton. Kendall suggested that the human remains from some of Pickton's victims may have been mixed with pork meat and processed for human consumption. He was quoted in the article saying, "It's very disturbing to think about."
Here it is, folks. Yeah, I agree. Though they honestly, Canada protects the pedos and the arts and all that other stuff. Like you just picture the most inhumane murder, and it doesn't matter. Victims are not protected. It's the people who do the crime. They are protected. It's disgusting.
But there is the possibility of some cross contamination. But the degree of it, or when or how much, we really don't know. Pickton would often entice prostitutes to his farm, along with other guests. He was generous, cooking for them, handing out drugs, hosting wild, never ending parties. Investigators feared that the food he was serving to his guests may have actually been the remains of some of his victims. The meat products from his farm were never distributed commercially, although some 40 friends and neighbors were given some of the meat for consumption. Kendall said, "Anyone who may still have frozen pork products from Pickton's farm to return those products to the police." The risk of any human disease being transmitted to those that have consumed the tainted meat was minimal. If the pork was cooked thoroughly, it's likely that any infectious agents present in the meat would be destroyed. Regardless, the possibility that they may have accidentally consumed human flesh had repulsed and enraged those who received meat products from Pickton. The Pickton proceedings in Canada have gone through several distinct stages, from interview transcripts to physical evidence.
Can you imagine learning about that? You're sitting there, you go to make I don't know, you're gonna make some bacon and you find out, or some ground up pork, and then you find out, oh, by the way, so if any got any meat from Robert Pickton on the farm, y'all, you need to go bring it to the police station because you may have some victims up in here. Like, fuck off, really? Do not ever take drugs on a pig farm. Never, ever, 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 ever. Yeah, don't eat pork. I mean, what the hell?
Analysis from several disciplines to victim profiles. RCMP officer Jack Mellis had described the blood evidence from a mattress in a mobile home on Pickton's pig farm. DNA testing matched it to Mona Wilson, whose head and hands were recovered from the farm grounds in 2002, 6 months after she'd gone missing. The skull of one victim linked to Pickton was found on the side of a road in British Columbia in 1995. Teams have covered the 17-acre farm to look for the most minute pieces of physical evidence, a bone, spots of blood, teeth, hair shafts, to find enough material for DNA analysis. They continue to excavate the ground to dig deep for evidence potentially buried years earlier. At the end of February, two RCMP officers described how in early April 2002, they had come across grisly human remains, including severed heads, in a freezer inside the building on the farm grounds. The frozen remains were thawed and eventually identified as parts of Serena Abbotsway and Andrea Joesbury. Investigators also turned up the jawbone of Brenda Wolfe, stuck in mud in a pig pen, and another jawbone at a different location was identified as that of Marnie Fay. The victims were mostly drug abusers and prostitutes, and the accused is an aging, uneducated pig farmer who liked to talk about himself. Still, he was allegedly the most prolific serial killer that a Canadian court had ever prosecuted, and the proceedings finally picked up. There was plenty of coverage as Pickton showed interest, and even appeared to smile during the analysis of a handheld reciprocating saw allegedly used to bisect 3 skulls and cut through other human bones. There were cut marks on Wolf's jawbone, as well as several ribs, 2 heel bones, and several vertebrae that had been collected. 10 of the saw's 45.
There's no way in hell that nobody knew what was going on that farm because there was also a bunch of people living there. Crackheads, you name it, drug abusers, they were all living there. And he would pay them, I don't know, by just doing drugs, do whatever the hell they want. It was a party house. So that's, there's no way in hell that they didn't know what was going on. If anything, they helped. They should have all been brought in, those bastards. Every single one of those people living on that farm was just holding those for a friend. Yeah.
blades came into evidence only because they could not be eliminated as the blades that had caused the cuts in the bones. The expert was certain a saw had produced them, but could not definitely identify what kind. A forensic entomologist, Dr. Gail Anderson, also testified that the remains of Abbotsway and Joesbury had been exposed to the elements for several weeks to several months before being stashed in the freezer where they were found. Insects apparently went into the buckets when the remains were picked up for storage, and their type and stage of development helped to scientifically establish a time frame. From April into early May, the jury members were shown graphic pictures of the decomposing heads, hands, and other remains as forensic pathologists testified about the autopsies. The first witness agreed that the skulls were cut from both front and behind with a reciprocating saw, and that they'd been forced apart where the cuts nearly joined. He also described the gunshot wounds to 3 of the victims, although ballistics experts could not link the recovered bullets to any of the guns found on the property. When Justice James Williams noticed the effect this evidence, which included images of maggots and skin sloughing, was having on some of the female jurors, he called for a recess. The next day, they heard that a .22 caliber revolver with a rubber sex toy attached over the barrel had yielded DNA from a victim and possibly from Pickton. Finally, forensic chemist Tony Fung testified.
Yeah, he didn't really explain that. So basically, that rubber thing that was on the end of the revolver was a dildo, and it actually contained DNA from a woman and Robert Pickton. He said that he was using that dildo, and he also wanted that dildo on there so that it would act as a silencer. Seriously? I have no idea, Anna. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. Yeah, a dildo bayonet. Like, what the hell? I don't know if it worked because I don't know if I don't think he didn't get to shoot it. He used it for a sexual toy apparently on himself and another person. But he said he had the dildo on there so that it would be a silencer, only he never got to shoot it, so I don't know if it worked or not. That's fucked.
That a substance found in a syringe that came from Pickton's office was methanol, commonly used in the windshield wiper fluid. An acquaintance of Pickton's had mentioned his statement about using this type of fluid to kill drug addicts. However, no methanol had shown up in tests on the remains of the victims in question. Traces of cocaine were found in all the tissue samples, along
Some of the stuff they're leaving out, like for instance, in the syringes, there was apparently this liquid. It was from the Spanish fly. That's why I got the trigger warning going up across here, Patty. Yeah, so there was apparently liquid from the Spanish fly, and he would inject that into the women as well. I know there was a talk about the methanol, and there was what the hell is it called? Antifreeze. He was going to use that, but instead he used the Spanish fly, I guess. Oh, the video. Oh.
with methadone and diazepam, or Valium. But toxicologist Heather Dinn declined to state that the concentration of drugs had been fatal. On May 10th, after 78 witnesses had taken the stand, the jury learned how Brenda Wolfe, the mother of 2, had asked for government assistance for food because she'd spent what little money she had to make a good Christmas for her kids. Elaine Allen, employed at Women's Information Safe House, or WISH, drop-in center, had known 5 of the 6 victims and told the jury what she knew about them. How Andrea spoke softly and Georgina Papin was charming and outspoken. How the opinionated Serena was often beaten up and showed numerous tracks from drug use, while Mona had a demanding boyfriend who sent her out to make money. Andrea, she said, had been the best-behaved client she had ever had, being both polite and aware of the needs of others. They often spoke quietly about her difficult life. Others who had known these women before they disappeared also testified. One had run a focus group attended by women from the streets, and the jury learned that in some cases, the women worked as prostitutes to feed their children because welfare payments were insufficient. Another witness was a friend of Georgina Papin, and she described how they had spent time baking and playing cards together, but then Georgina fell back into drug use and was soon gone. Then, a former prostitute and drug dealer told about her friend, Brenda Wolfe, who vanished in the spring of 2000. Brenda had deteriorated to the point of not bathing or washing her clothes. Before she disappeared, she was a mess, having lost about 50 pounds. The next stage involved what Pickton might have done with the women after they died. Jim Kress, a driver for a Vancouver rendering company, described how he had picked up 2 to 5 45-gallon barrels of pork offal and burnt meat chunks from the Picton farm to take to West Coast Reduction. Before 2002, customers could dump stuff at the plant themselves, unsupervised, and Kress had seen Picton there once. While this testimony was suggestive, given the statement Picton made about victim disposal, it was not proof of anything sinister. Drama entered the courtroom during the first half of June, with 2 controversial witnesses offering potentially explosive testimony.
This is where he was dropping off all like the entrails and everything. 2002, I believe, Patty. Where Robert Pickton was dropping off all the stuff that he couldn't use from pigs, right? And that stuff would go into this plant and to make soap and lipstick and stuff like that. I mean, can you imagine? Not only are these people eating the meat, they're wearing the meat. Like, what?
Both were acquaintances of Picton's. The first man was only mildly interesting, although Canadian papers had created great anticipation, but the second stirred several edgy moments. Pat Casanova, once arrested during the investigation of 15 of the victims now associated with Picton, used to regularly butcher pigs on the Picton farm. Casanova, married and suffering from treatment for throat cancer, admitted that he had received oral sex from one of the victims, Andrea Joesbury, while in Picton's trailer. He remembered her name as Angel, and that Dinah Taylor had brought her to the farm. Casanova had paid Taylor, who gave some of the money
Some gates are better left unopened.
to Angel. Casanova said he'd noticed items of clothing in the trailer.
I didn't know that part. This Casanova bullshit. Seriously? I've heard that too, Darth Hideous. Absolutely. This idiot calls himself Casanova.
And some purses that belonged to women who were not present, but admitted that Picton had never spoken to him about missing women. Casanova had known Picton for approximately 2 decades and had seen him angry only once. Being caught in a lie in earlier statements, Casanova admitted that he told the police after Picton was arrested that he'd been sexually engaged on the farm with only one woman, Roxanne. He'd never mentioned Angel, and in fact, he might have been one of the last people to see her alive. The defense attorneys seemed to hope to pose Casanova as a good
See what I mean? And there's many more people that were on that fucking farm. They knew what was going on. Like, come on. They should all have been charged. All of them.
suspect in Angel's murder, although he was not charged with it after his arrest. In any event, the jury did see that Casanova was able to lie easily to protect himself. Thus, he was less than a credible witness, especially because he told a police officer that he doesn't lie. Casanova defended himself on this point with the notion that he's sometimes forgetful. Regarding certain pieces of evidence, he explained his DNA on a slaughterhouse door as the result of mucus spewed after his throat treatments. He denied using orange bags for carrying butchered pigs, deflecting the implication that he might be the killer since a victim's DNA was found on such a bag. Picton's attorneys were unsuccessful at transferring suspicion from their client onto Casanova, but they did manage to undermine his claim to honesty. Similarly, they attacked the next prosecution witness, but to greater effect. Scott Chubb was one of the prosecution's key witnesses. Having visited the farm a great deal and been privy to certain dark comments Picton had reportedly made, he was the informant who initially led police to the pig farm. He'd met Picton in 1993, becoming an employee and allowing himself to be videotaped early in 2002 as he related what he knew from his dealings with Picton. The jury had seen this tape. A police officer, Nathan Wells, had cultivated Chubb as an informant, paying him $1,450 altogether. Thanks to what Chubb revealed, falsely, it turns out, they were able to get the warrant to search for illegal weapons.
I'm sorry, they got what they deserve, but you're gonna sit there and send some asshole in there named Chubb, and of course he comes out with a wrong story. It's all made up. See what I mean by Canada? Like, we're stupid. Yeah, it's just not cool, right? Oh, you're back, mama.
Wells said that, at the time, he was unaware that Picton was a suspect in the disappearance of women from East Side Vancouver. He believed only that he was confiscating an illegal gun. Prosecutor Jeff Beauregard led Chubb, a former heroin user, through testimony that included the fact that he'd had a strange conversation with Picton one day. Picton had mentioned.
So they were going to allow Chubb, the heroin user, to go to court and testify. Are you fucking kidding me? Wow.
That a woman named Lynn Ellingson was costing him a lot of money, and he wanted Chubb to talk to her. Chubb understood that he meant that he should hurt or get rid of her. The police had suspected that she was blackmailing Picton over something she had witnessed. Chubb said Picton had offered him $1,000 for this favor, but the subject grew even darker. During the course of this conversation, Chubb says that Picton told him it was easy to kill drug addicts because they had needle marks and tracks already. If a person injected windshield washer fluid into them, they'd die, and police would dismiss it as the result of a drug overdose. The jury had already learned that investigators had found a syringe containing windshield washer fluid in Picton's trailer. This seemed like a pretty damning testimony. Under cross-examination, Picton's attorney, Peter Ritchie, put Chubb on the spot, intending to show that he was a malleable person, easily exploited to state whatever facts the prosecutor required, even in contradiction to things he'd already said. He wanted Chubb to admit he'd been trying to get money from the police in exchange for his testimony, to the tune of several $1,000s. But Chubb said it was for protection for himself and his family, in case Picton's brother, who'd threatened him, came after him. He denied being paid as an informant, although police notes indicated they had paid him specifically for information. There were other contradictions too, but Chubb offered a head injury as an excuse for his poor memory. Still, his comments sounded more like revisionist memory. He denied and then admitted to certain facts, such as his claim that he did not know much about guns and had only handled Picton's when he actually had a conviction for possession of an unregistered weapon. In explaining why he'd gone to the police at all.
So would that be the gun that he's looking for, the one that had the dildo on it, or what? 5 men went missing. The killer joined the search party, but when they got it, really? Yeah, he's a like what? Chubb. Really?
He said it was to get them to go after a drug dealer to help get his girlfriend off cocaine. He'd supposedly told police at the time that he'd seen a forbidden firearm on the property, a MAC-10, but in court, Chubb admitted he'd only been told about it. He said it was Wells who got the information confused. Picton seemed to be enjoying the dismantling of Chubb's credibility, and some reporters believed he was nearly ready to laugh, despite the grim nature of the accusations. Even so, Chubb told the attorneys they could go ahead and attack his character, but he was not the one on trial for 6 counts of murder. By the end of July, as the courtroom went into hiatus for 2 weeks to give the jury vacation time, the prosecution in the Picton case had presented its key witnesses. Andrew Bellwood gave the most disturbing testimony and also took the most heat from the defense. He was the 97th witness to date, and an estimated 100 million Canadian dollars had been spent on the case. Bellwood seemed cavalier about sitting down to a pork dinner with Picton in 1999. No surprise in that, since it was a pig butchering farm. But it was the day after Picton had described to Bellwood how he had killed prostitutes before feeding their remains to the pigs. Allegedly, he had sex with the women first and then murdered them there on the grounds. Hacked off parts were tossed to the pigs, which consumed them, and other parts were mingled in barrels with pig entrails and dumped at a disposal plant. It was an easy operation, Picton supposedly implied, after he lured them to the farm with the drug of their choice. Picton's murder method, Bellwood said, involved gagging the victims, handcuffing them, and using a wire with looped ends. He even acted it out for Bellwood. He motioned to me he would put them doggy-style on the bed and have intercourse with them, Bellwood described for the jury. As he was telling me the story, it was almost like there was a woman on the bed. It was like a play. Defense attorney Adrian Brooks found it hard to believe that after Picton described such disgusting events, Bellwood then ate a meal with him, especially pork. Bellwood's reply was that Picton was a nice fellow who had loaned.
But he's a nice fellow. What the fuck? Are you serious? He tells you all that. You sit there to eat pork with him, you fucking idiot. Really? I told you we were stupid, but come on. Come on. I shouldn't even be laughing, but I don't know what else to do. I'm just some of these details I have heard, some of them I have. I can just imagine my face is just like ridiculous. Probably like, oh my God. Yeah, we're both doing stories about cannibalism, right? Yeah, you for sure. Me, it's turning into that. Casanova. Fuck's sake.
Him money, and he decided the story was probably fabricated. He wasn't about to go to the police, since he himself was using drugs. Brooks then pointed to a serious inconsistency in the testimony. Bellwood claimed to have been alone with Pickton during the gruesome conversation, but earlier he had said that Lynn Ellingson was with them. In response, Bellwood blustered that he would not have gone through all that he had over the past 5 years only to sit there now and lie. He had simply confused two events, he explained, and Ellingson must have been present for something else. The credibility of Bellwood's testimony was also threatened by the fact that he had been questioned in association with several missing women in the Edmonton area, presumably the victims of a serial killer. He claimed the police had picked him up because of his association with the Pickton case, implying it was more or less a vicious circle. He had not been charged with anything. However, during the time he stayed on the farm, heard Pickton's supposed reenactment of murder, and then ate a pork dinner, he was in the midst of a serious addiction to crack cocaine. Yet, Bellwood insisted that his memory about the content of the conversation is clear. His addiction did not affect that, and he left the farm soon thereafter. Justice James Williams suspended jury deliberations on December 6, 2007, after he discovered an error in his charge to the jury. Earlier in the day, the jury had submitted a written request to Justice James, requesting clarification of his charge, asking, "Are we able to say yes if we infer the accused acted indirectly?" On December 9, 2007, the jury returned a verdict that Pickton was not guilty on 6 counts of first-degree murder, but was guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder. A second-degree murder conviction carries a punishment of a life sentence with no possibility of parole for a period between 10 and 25 years, to be set by the trial judge. On December 11, 2007, after reading 18 victim impact statements, British Columbia Supreme Court Judge Justice James Williams sentenced Pickton to life with no possibility of parole for 25 years, the maximum punishment for second-degree murder and equal to the sentence which would have been imposed for a first-degree murder conviction. Mr. Pickton's conduct was murderous and repeatedly so. I cannot know the details, but I know this. What happened to them was senseless and despicable, said Justice Williams in passing the sentence. On August 4, 2010, the other 20 charges were stayed. 3 appeals have been filed since to the British Columbia Court of Appeal. The first one made by the defense was rejected, and the one made by the prosecution was allowed on the grounds that the trial judge had made a mistake in excluding some evidence and in splitting the charges. Pickton's defense then filed an appeal with the Canadian Supreme Court, which was rejected on July 30, 2009. He is currently incarcerated. The RCMP and Vancouver Police have suffered some criticism for their way of handling the case.
He only got charged for the 6 crimes because they said that if he was going to be charged with all those crimes, all the 49, or what was it, the 26 they had proof of, they would be in court for a couple years, and they didn't want to do that, so they only wanted to charge him with 6. No death penalty. He gets to sit and watch TV in his jail cell. He's protected. Bullshit. It's not fucking right.
Make a choice.
Knock at the cabin.
Is that a cheese string? Trade you my bagel for it.
Trade you my ant farm?
Cheese
That was
strings.
rude.
There are more questions tonight about
Here's a quick one here. Yeah, I would have said I'm not hungry either, and yet the idiot, they kept saying, "Oh, he sat down and had a pork dinner." I'm sorry, I couldn't help but laugh. I shouldn't be laughing, but I don't know what else to do. This apparently is new tapes released, supposedly.
how police in British Columbia handle the Robert Pickton investigation, this time prompted by the release of video at the Missing Women's Inquiry. It's from January of 2000, 2 years before the pig farmer would be charged with murder. Ian Hannamansing is on the story for us tonight. Ian.
Peter, it's disturbing enough to see Robert William Pickton questioned by police 12 years ago. Even more chilling to know afterwards he just walked away. Already the leading suspect in the case of Vancouver's missing women, it was a relaxed Robert William Pickton who sat down with police.
You drink? Oh, no. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't use drugs. And then everybody says, how can you guys are so bloodshot?
This tape is now public because it's evidence at this judicial inquiry, trying to find out whether police should have arrested Pickton earlier. During the interrogation, investigators asked him about a vicious knife fight with a woman at his farm.
I turned around. I didn't take the knife away from her. I did not take the knife away from her. I aimed it to her and I knifed her twice. I did that. I admit I did that. That's one thing I shouldn't have done.
2 hours of questions, no.
He looks like he does stink, Patty. Everybody said that he would barely ever shower, and he would always be in his like rubber boots and hey Benita, and he'd be in like the suspenders and those long pants for the farm. And he would never like shower. He would always smell like pig shit. And people just dealt with it. They didn't seem to care because, drugs, booze, party, whatever. Free fucking pig food. Like, you know what he looks like? He looks like the guy off of Wrong Turn, the inbred guys. He looks like one. He really does. Overalls, thank you. Yeah, he looks like it, big time.
Incriminating answers.
So you've never taken any of the prostitutes back to your trailer?
Not since this incident, no.
But before that incident?
Nope.
This now retired RCMP officer was watching the questioning as it took place back in 2000, and today said it was frustrating.
It certainly wasn't a textbook case on how to do an interview.
Lawyer Cameron Ward says the tape is in sharp contrast to another, far more successful interrogation of a serial killer, Russell Williams.
Well, that was a textbook example of how to interrogate a possible suspect.
In Pickton's case, it would be 2 more years before he was arrested.
Had the interview been better handled, the result may well have been differently, and Mr. Pickton may well have been prevented from murdering a number of women who died after that date.
In hindsight, of course, these missed opportunities seem clear. Now the inquiry will have to determine whether they should have been obvious to police and prosecutors at the time. Peter?
All right, Ian, thank you.
See, that's what I hate about Canada. Like, that is disgusting. They sit there and they should have done something about it, and they just don't, and they get away with it. And it's like, oh well, oops, we should have, but we didn't. So, oh well. Yeah, I'm done talking about it. Sorry. I feel sick. Well, I want to do the Pickton case. There's still so much more I was going to do, but I think I've had enough tonight. Have you guys had enough tonight? I've had enough tonight. Hey, Teresa. No worries. I'm done now anyways. It's not the best stream. It was gross. Yeah, we need something to watch. You're right. I keep forgetting that we should do that after. Oh my God, it's minus 28 now. Something funny. Sorry, there's probably an echo. I gotta mute myself. Yeah, it's crazy here. It's minus 28 and it's going even lower.
Huh?
You suck.
Oh my God!
What happened?
I owed him up. NANI?! Huh? Hmm? Oh my god! Run. Huh? Huh? Hmm? 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 Run.
He was so cute. Just that little bastard. He wouldn't let his brother or sisters play. Thank you for the very disturbing stream and tolerating the semi-disturbing. Hey, no problem. Thanks for joining. Give me the box and we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Yeah, it's crazy. Watch your newest puppy videos. All right. Oh. Shit.
Pretty woman walking down the street.
I don't need 12 hours of that. That's for damn sure. That is crazy. They're so cute. I know you told me that it was coming this way, but I didn't think it would be this cold. Yeah, right now it's -28. My cat was caught eating the whipped cream off my mocha, then hissed at me when I took it. Well, I'm not going anywhere. I did earlier, but I had to take a cab. You have to finish juniors too. Yeah, no, I feel better. Well, yeah, I went to had to go downtown and I had to go check my mail. Of course, all my bills are skyrocketed. All right, I'm gonna get off here. I'm gonna go see what Leland's doing. I want him to watch a movie with me, actually. You're welcome. What's wrong, Claire? Oh, what's wrong with your eye? What happened to your eye? What's wrong? It's okay. No, her eye's stuck shut. Oh, no, it's not. Were you tricking me? All right, I'm out. Tomorrow, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sure I'll be live tomorrow as well. All right, you guys have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.